My name is Cyrene Halbrook. I am 70 years old. Though most days I feel older in spirit than in body, I was once a librarian. The kind of woman who believed words could make people better. Now I am mostly quiet. Not because I have nothing to say, but because I have learned that silence often speaks louder than pride. That Christmas night, the house felt borrowed. Though my name was still printed on the property deed, my daughter, Vespra, whom everyone calls Vess, moved through it as if it belonged to her. She floated from guest to guest, laughter crisp and timed. A glass of Pinot balanced in one manicured hand. Her husband trailed behind. Polite, half present, the dining table glowed under the chandelier my late husband once restored with his own hands. Around it sat Vess's colleagues and 2 investors from Savannah, people who measured success by the weight of their jewelry. I stayed in the kitchen, keeping the roast warm and pretending to tidy. Though every sound from the dining room reached me clearly, the laughter, the small talk, the calculated compliments. Mother, Vez called, her tone sweet and sharp at once. Could you bring the extra plates? I carried them in, careful with my step. The moment I entered, the air thinned. Vess's eyes flicked to me and then to her guests. Her smile hardened. The maid will eat in the kitchen, she said, for a heartbeat. No one breathed. The man beside her shifted, unsure whether to laugh. Her husband lowered his gaze. I stood still, holding the stack of china, my fingers steady, though I felt the blood leave them. I had been humiliated before, but never by my own child in my own home. And yet, the strangest calm filled me, as if I had been waiting for that exact sentence, rehearsing it somewhere deep inside. I set the plates down gently, looked straight at her, and answered, "All right, dear, but you'll be living on the street." The silence cracked like thin glass. Someone coughed. Vess's face drained of color. I turned back toward the kitchen, my hands suddenly light, my heart quiet. That was the night my daughter learned who really owned the house, and the night I decided it was time for her to remember what family used to mean. That morning, the house smelled of cloves and lemon polish. Vess had been up since dawn, directing the cleaning crew as if preparing for inspection. She moved fast. Her voice clipped, a smile permanently fixed for no one in particular. "Mother, could you move that vase? The lilies are too sentimental." She gestured toward the photograph beside it, my wedding portrait. "And maybe this, too. It feels dated." She didn't look at me when she said it. She rarely did anymore. I lifted the frame slowly, tracing the glass before placing it inside a drawer. "Your father loved that photo," I murmured. "Yes, but tonight is about creating a fresh impression," Vess replied, tightening the ribbon around a stack of linen napkins. "You understand. Write investors like clean lines, no clutter, no past." I thought. Through the open door, I caught sight of Norabelle Quince, our neighbor. Standing by the fence with her terrier, she waved. I stepped outside for a moment, grateful for the cold air. "Everything all right?" Cyrene Norabelle asked softly. "Your daughter seems particular. She's just nervous," I said. "Important guests tonight." Norabelle tilted her head. "You're patient as always. I don't think I could stand someone rearranging my own walls." "She's young," I lied. "She'll learn." Vess's voice floated from inside. "Mother, we're missing 2 wine glasses. Could you check the pantry?" Norabelle smiled faintly. "There she goes again?" Then, lowering her tone, "You still own this place, don't you?" I looked at the house white shutters, the oak tree leaning toward the porch as if listening. "My husband's name is on the cornerstone," I said carefully, "and mine, on a few papers she hasn't seen." When I stepped back inside, Vess was aligning the silverware by millimeter. "You'll sit near the kitchen door," she said absently. Convenient, I answered, smoothing the tablecloth. In case anyone mistakes me for the help. She didn't hear the edge in my voice, or she chose not to. By evening, every trace of family had vanished from sight. No photos, no laughter, no history. Only candlelight and the fragile shine of Vess's ambition filled the house I once called mine, and I stayed silent, because some debts take longer to understand than to repay. 10 years earlier, the sound of rain against the shutters was heavier than I remembered. Charleston had been drowning for 3 days, and Vespera's voice over the phone trembled harder than the thunder. "Mother, it's all gone," she said. "The hurricane flooded both listings. The investors pulled out. I can't even cover payroll." She was 30 at the time, ambitious, certain she could turn charm into fortune. I heard her trying not to cry. "What do you need?" I asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. Maybe you know someone who could lend me a little to keep the business open." After we hung up, I went to my husband's study, untouched since he passed. The shelves smelled faintly of dust and old paper. His first edition book collection, 37 volumes of history and poetry, had been his pride. I ran my hand along the spines before calling a collector in Savannah. 2 weeks later, the shelves were empty, and a cashier's check for $200,000 sat folded in my purse. I told Vespera it came from a private friend of your father's. Her relief was immediate. "Oh, Mother, I'll pay it back. I swear," she said, clutching my hands as if I had rescued her. I smiled and told her to focus on rebuilding. She never asked again, but that was only the first time. When the insurance claim for her office roof was denied, I used my retirement fund to pay the contractor. When the property taxes came due on the new house she insisted on buying, I covered them quietly through my attorney, Gideon Pike. He drew up a joint ownership clause and filed it under my maiden name just in case. "You're protecting yourself." "Finally," Gideon said one afternoon, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm protecting her," I replied, "from the kind of fall that leaves you bitter forever." Vespera called that same night. "You won't believe it. Mother, a friend helped with the taxes. People are kind when you least expect it." I pressed the phone to my ear and listened to her gratitude spill toward someone who didn't exist. "I'm glad for you, darling," I said. After we hung up, I opened my ledger and wrote the date, the amount, and 2 words beside it. For Vess, I wasn't building wealth. I was building safety brick by invisible brick, even if it meant she'd never see the hands that laid them. After the guests left, the house deflated like a balloon losing air. The laughter Vess had polished for hours dissolved into silence. I gathered plates, stacking them carefully to keep from shaking. The chandelier above still glowed too brightly, catching the smear of her lipstick on every glass. Vess leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You made things awkward tonight," she said. I didn't look up. "Did I? You embarrassed me in front of investors? That little comment about living on the street completely unnecessary." I scraped the leftovers into a bowl, the spoon clinking louder than it should. "It wasn't a comment," I said. "It was an answer." Her tone sharpened. "Mother, you really need to learn timing. I was saving that deal for weeks. And now they'll think we're some tragic family from a drama." "You invited me to dinner," I replied softly. "I simply attended." Vess exhaled through her nose, as if trying to blow the moment away. "Let's not do this again. Next year we'll host somewhere else." Then she turned and walked upstairs, heels clicking like a metronome of dismissal. Norabel slipped in through the back door, still in her shawl. She must have stayed behind to help. "Cyrene," she whispered, "you don't deserve this." "I kept washing dishes. It's fine." "No, it isn't. I saw her face when you spoke up." "She treats you like furniture she doesn't want to polish." The words landed heavier than she meant them to. "She's my daughter," I said. That's not a license, Norabel murmured. That's a habit you can unlearn. When she left, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that hums against your skin. I wiped the counter, then stood in the doorway of the kitchen, the place I had been told to eat, the place where Vess's words still hung like steam. I remembered a Christmas long ago. Vess was 12, her cheeks pink from the cold. She had wrapped my hands in hers and said, "Someday, Mom, I'll buy you a house with servants." I smiled at the memory, though now it cut deep. She had kept half that promise. She just changed the roles. I opened my desk drawer. Inside were 3 envelopes: taxes, deed, insurance. I lifted the last one, felt its weight, and reached for the phone. "Gideon," I said, steady and clear, "it's time to finalize the deed." The next morning, I took the bus downtown. I preferred it that way. Quiet, anonymous. Just another woman with a folder clutched to her chest. Charleston's courthouse loomed ahead, pale stone against the winter sky. Inside, the corridors smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. Gideon Pike was waiting in his office across the square. He stood when I entered, his kind eyes flicking toward the folder in my hands. "You brought everything I always do." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, stacked with manila envelopes and a single, freshly printed deed. "It's official," he said, tapping the document. "The property deed now lists you as sole owner. Filed this morning under your full name, Cyrene Halbrook, through the survivorship clause you activated after your husband's death." For a moment, I stared at the seal. I had signed many papers in my life: mortgage renewals, tuition checks, hospital forms, but this one felt different. It wasn't about ownership. It was about reclaiming air. Gideon folded his hands. "You realize this will burn bridges." "Then they were never bridges," I said. He hesitated, studying me. "You're not doing this out of spite, are you?" "No, I'm doing it because truth deserves a place to live." We reviewed each page, signatures neat and aligned. He slid the copies into a brown envelope and handed it across the desk. "Keep this safe. When the time comes, you'll know what to do." "I already do," I told him. Outside, the streets glistened after a brief rain. I walked past St. Michael's bell tower, listening to its chime roll through the city like a slow heartbeat. By the time I reached home, Vess's voice was already circulating through the neighborhood. Norabel met me at the gate, concern written across her face. "I just came from the club," she said. "Your daughter's been telling people you've been forgetful lately. She says I'm slipping." Norabel nodded uneasily. "She hinted you've been misplacing bills, calling people twice. You know, planting seeds." I smiled faintly. Let her garden grow. "Cyrene, truth walks slower," I said, unlocking the front door, "but it always arrives." Inside, I placed Gideon's envelope in the drawer marked title. The house was silent again, the kind of silence that waits. Upstairs, I could hear Vess on the phone, laughing lightly, her voice too loud. She thought she was writing a story about my decline. She didn't know I had already written the ending. A week later, Vespera sent an invitation printed on heavy cream paper. "Family dinner, to clear misunderstandings." The tone alone made me smile. Misunderstandings, such a graceful word for cruelty. When I arrived, the table was smaller this time, but the performance was the same. Vess wore a silver dress, her husband in a dark suit. Aunt Selwyn sat nervously at one end, and Norabel occupied the other with quiet curiosity. Gideon Pike had been invited as a family friend, though his briefcase resting beside his chair told me otherwise. "Mother," Vess began brightly, "thank you for coming. We thought it was time for a calm discussion about the future." I sat, hands folded in my lap. "Whose future?" "Darling, She smiled too hard. Yours, of course. David and I have been looking into assisted living communities, places where you'd be comfortable, safe, and cared for. The words were smooth, rehearsed. I heard the tremor beneath them. I see, I said. And the house. Her husband cleared his throat. We'd maintain it. It's too much responsibility for you now. I glanced at the guests. Norabel looked ready to intervene, but I lifted a hand slightly. It's generous of you to think of my comfort, I said, reaching for the leather folder beside my plate. Though before we discuss living arrangements, there's something I'd like to share. Vess blinked, her smile twitching. Now, Mother, maybe later now, I said softly. I opened the folder, sliding out a stack of neatly clipped papers. These are records of property taxes paid over the last 10 years. The checks came from my account. Here are receipts for the new roof and the electrical rewiring. And this, I held up the final document, is the updated occupancy deed filed 2 weeks ago. Vess froze. What is that supposed to mean? Gideon adjusted his glasses, unfolded the top page, and read aloud. Current legal owner, Cyrene Halbrook. The room went still. Aunt Selwyn gasped quietly. Norabel's eyes flicked toward Vess, who had turned pale beneath her makeup. Her husband muttered, You never checked the documents. Vess's voice broke. You changed it without telling me. I met her gaze evenly. No, dear. I simply restored what was always mine. She looked down at the deed as if it were a foreign language. The air in the room shifted, not loud, not dramatic, just final. I reached for my glass of water, my voice calm. Now that we've clarified ownership, perhaps we can talk about comfort, yours or mine. Vespera found me in the kitchen after everyone had gone. Her mascara had run, dark streaks down the face she once guarded like a brand. The folder still lay on the counter between us. You can't humiliate me like this, she said, voice trembling. I turned off the kettle. I didn't humiliate you. Vess, you did that the moment you forgot who opened the door for you. She pressed her palms to the counter. You blindsided me in front of everyone. Do you know how that feels? Yes, I said quietly. I've known for quite some time. She started to speak again, but her breath caught. I don't know how to fix this. By starting small, I answered. By learning respect before you lose the meaning of home. I opened a second folder I had carried from the dining room. Inside was a single page Gideon had typed, and I had signed earlier that week. I slid it toward her. This is not punishment, I said. It's a boundary. You may stay here, but there are conditions. Her eyes flicked across the page. Therapy. Contributions to expenses. No public remarks about you. She looked up. You really think I'd agree to this? I think you already have, I said. Every kindness you've ever taken for granted was an unspoken contract. I'm just writing it down. She pushed the paper back. You're treating me like a tenant. I'm treating you like an adult, I replied. You can choose to live here in decency or to live elsewhere in pride. Tears blurred the lines of her signature as she finally took the pen. What happens if I fail? I folded the signed page carefully. Then I'll wish you well and you'll wish you had not. For a long time, we said nothing. The old clock above the pantry clicked each second between us. Vess wiped her face, looking suddenly smaller, less certain. Do you still love me? She asked. Voice small. I never stopped. I said, that's why I'm doing this. When she went upstairs, I placed the agreement beside the deed in my desk drawer. My hands didn't shake anymore. Forgiveness, I thought, isn't a welcome mat. It's a fence that keeps peace in. 2 months passed, and the house changed its breathing. The air no longer bristled with Vess's temper. It carried something softer, cautious, but alive. She still kept to herself most mornings, leaving for therapy or the community kitchen downtown, where she said she needed to be useful again. I didn't ask for details. Silence was our truce. One afternoon, Norabel came by with a basket of bread. She looked around the kitchen, noticing the absence of tension, as if the walls had finally exhaled. "She's behaving," Norabel said quietly. "I've seen her walking the neighborhood, head down. People talk, you know." "I imagine they do," I answered. Norabel placed the basket on the counter. "You could have thrown her out after that night. No one would have blamed you." I poured us tea. "Then I'd have lost twice," I said. "My home and my daughter." She studied me for a long moment. "You're softer than I'd be. Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just understand what it costs to rebuild alone." After she left, I found the old apron vest once mocked the one I wore while cooking for her parties, the same one that made me look, in her words, too domestic. It hung behind the pantry door, faded but whole. I folded it neatly, carried it to the fireplace, and struck a match. The fabric caught fast, curling into itself before collapsing to ash. The smell of smoke was clean, almost sweet. Later that evening, I sat at my desk and wrote a short note for Gideon. "The deed stands, but peace is not signed on paper. Thank you for helping me make room for both." I sealed the envelope and left it on the table. Beside the new stack of utility bills Vess had paid on time for the first time in years, upstairs. I heard her door close gently. No slammed hinges. No storm of footsteps. Just the quiet weight of someone learning. The house felt warmer that night, not from the fire, but from something smaller and steadier, the sound of respect being practiced, one silence at a time. A year passed quietly, the kind that moves without needing announcement. Christmas came again, and this time the house stayed simple. The table was smaller, the lights softer, and there was no guest list, just Norabel, Aunt Selwyn, and the faint scent of cinnamon from the oven. I was arranging the plates when Vess arrived, carrying a store-bought pie still warm in its plastic tray. She hesitated at the doorway, her coat buttoned to the throat, eyes searching the room as though it might refuse her. Traffic was bad. She said, "I hope I'm not late." "You're right on time," I told her. "Come in before the tea cools." She set the pie on the counter and exhaled. "I didn't bake this. I wanted to, but I'm still learning how to keep things from falling apart." "That's all right," I said. "It's the thought that holds flavor, not the crust." When the others left after dinner, she stayed behind to help with the dishes. We worked quietly until she spoke. "Mother," she said, "I owe you more than I can name. I used to think money proved worth. Now I'm just grateful for a seat at the table." I dried my hands and turned to her. "Seats can be lost," I said gently, "but they can also be earned back." Her voice wavered. "I know." She looked at the dining room, where one empty chair waited at the end of the table. A folded napkin rested on it, embroidered with gold thread. She touched it softly. "What's this, a reminder?" I said. "For lessons learned. For the spaces we keep open when we choose to change." Vess nodded, tears gathering without falling. "May I sit there next year? If you keep practicing what you've learned," I said, "it will already be yours." Later, when she left, the night air carried the faintest trace of pine and forgiveness. I stood by the window, watching her taillights disappear past the gate her father once built. The house was still, every chair in its place except the one left open. Respect isn't inherited, it's practiced, one dinner at a time.